Greetings, my fellow freedom-loving sovereign thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida, and today's day is Friday, December 7th, 2018. So let us begin. Yes, to hear a train coming by. Great timing. But thanks for tuning in, folks. Just hanging out. Friday night right now in the heart of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Just kicking back in my camper. And yeah, so I go, what the hell? Let me just doing it here because I know that some past episodes I had a lot of like wind distortion. So I'm trying to prevent that from happening here. Yes, so it's the 77th anniversary of the horrific events that happened in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Japanese sneak attack, to call it. It's interesting about that because they've done it before with Russia, with the start of the Russo-Japanese War around 1907, I think it was, or 1904, it was around that time. So it's nothing really new on that during their time of imperialism as well. So I'll be talking about that, and of course, George Herbert Walker Bush and the media. And I'll be narrating it from Bob Livingston's notes or memos from personalliberty.com. So it's a good site. Check it out, folks. And trust me, because you could see things in a broader perspective. Yeah, he has conservative views, but there's a lot more merit, and he has a lot of history to back up his viewpoints. Great team. And I find that more essential because everyone's trying to still believe their party's better than everyone else's. And I hear about Captain Ahab Nancy Pelosi thinks the House of Representatives will revolve around her. How pathetic that is. I'm just wondering what kind of meds she may be using, because if you remember some of her interviews, she's like pretty zombified, which I don't wish anyone ill. But it's just, wow, man, you got these career politicians everywhere. Make a career. I'm an attorney, and I'm pathetic at what I do. So I'll be talking about that. And now, we'll be talking about Pearl Harbor. The Pearl Harbor story you won't hear in school or much of anywhere else. Remember, last time I talked about this, it was more like knowledge that the Roosevelt administration knew about the attack was happening, and people called it an inside job, which is understandable, but a lot of great comrades back then have been murdered or died because of FDR's Klan's stupidity. I mean by Klan, the administration. However, we'll be talking about this, and it came out yesterday. The Pearl Harbor story you don't even hear in school or much of anywhere else. As it reads here, one of the biggest fake news stories of the last 100 years is the story taught to American school children from early on and repeated ad nauseum without inquiry by the mainstream media that Pearl Harbor was a sneak attack that caught America totally unawares because the Japanese were engaging in duplicitous peace negotiations, forcing the U.S. into World War II. President Franklin Dover Roosevelt was itching to get into the Second Great War, but the American public, with the horror of the war to end all wars still fresh, was strongly against American intervention. So Roosevelt set about goading both Japanese and Germans, neither which wanted to tangle with America. The plan to entice the Japanese attack began in October 1940. Knowledge of the plan that was limited to a few select loyal military and naval intelligence officials and a handful of trusted members of the Roosevelt administration. It is outlined in the McCulloch Memo, a.k.a. the 8 Action Memo, written by Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCullum, who provided Roosevelt with intelligence reports on Japan and oversaw every intercepted and decoded Japanese military and diplomatic report destined for the White House. McCullum's planned attack into action on October 8, 1940, one day after the memo went to Roosevelt, and continued even while Roosevelt was telling the American public, your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars. Well, that's what happens, folks, when you have a president who sold his rear end to the banksters, just like FDR. So anyone that telling me he's such a great president, use a penile microphone when you do. Thank you. I will proceed. The 8 action items for provoking Japan with these: make an arrangement with Britain for the use of British bases in the Pacific, particularly Singapore. Make an arrangement with Holland for the use of base facilities and acquisition of supplies in the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. Give all possible aid to the Chinese government of Chiang Kai-shek. I will stop there for the moment. Chiang Kai-shek was the leader of the nationalist China. But actually, his regime supported victimless armament that happened in 1935. So it wasn't Mao Tse-tung, it was Chiang Kai-shek. And what happened? Japan went to war with them, and the people were unarmed. Ain't that beautiful? You should thank him for that as well. Treat him like Mao Tse-tung. Send a division of long-range heavy cruisers to the Orient, Philippines, or Singapore. Send 2 divisions of submarines to the Orient. Keep the main strength of the U.S. fleet now in the Pacific, the vicinity of the Hawaiian Islands. Insist that the Dutch refuse to grant Japanese demands for undue economic concessions, particularly oil. Complete embargo with all trade with Japan in collaboration with a similar embargo imposed by the British Empire. The last step in plan was completed on July 26, 1941. In truth, the U.S. essentially declared war on Japan with this embargo. Any embargo of force at the point of a gun is an act of war. America was also helping Japan's enemy, China, with war material through the Lend-Lease program. So, I'd like to stop there for a moment. Embargoes declared war is an act of war. See, I'm not the only one saying that. And you hear now they want to do it with Iran. Do sanctions and embargoes on Iran. Yes, to all you tough guys out there who have palmolive hands, go on the front line of battle if we go to war with this country, God forbid. Let's see how tough you sleaze bags are. And I said it to some of my senators, Marco Rubio, about this. Go on the front line. He never replied back. I gave him my name and number. No response. And I'll proceed. Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral James O. Richardson opposes FDR's orders to station the fleet at Pearl. So FDR replaced him with Admiral Husband E. Kimmel in February 1941. FDR also put about Kimmel's knowledge Admiral Walter S. Anderson of the Office of Naval Intelligence as Kimmel's third in command at Pearl Harbor and assigned him to supervise the radio intercept operation there. Anderson was also, upon his arrival at Pearl Harbor, established his personal housing well away from the harbor on the other side of the mountain, giving him safety from the looming attack. American intelligence learned in January 1941 that if hostilities broke out, the Japanese had decided to initiate a surprise attack at Pearl. It also learned that spies were making bombing maps of Pearl Harbor, but kept this information from Kimmel and the FBI. American intelligence tracked the Japanese fleet through radio intercepts as it headed toward Pearl Harbor. On November 22nd, Admiral Royal E. Ingersoll issued a vacancy order to clear all shipping out of the path being taken by the Japanese Navy, and on November 25th, ordered Kimmel to withdraw his ships, patrolling the area from which the Japanese attack would take place. In the days before the attack, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Harold Stark, who was part of the FDR circle and in on the plot, ordered Kimmel to move his aircraft carriers along with the large escort of the most modern ships to deliver planes to Midway and Wake Islands, leaving behind an enticing target of ships, though only the older World War I vintage ones. In Pearl. In his magnus opus titled Freedom Betrayed, Herbert Hoover's Secret History in the Second World War and its Aftermath, Finally published in 2011, Hoover tells of the many diplomatic overtures the Japanese made to fend off hostilities. These FDR rejected outright. Hoover then quotes from the Wedemeyer Reports, a book by General Albert C. Wedemeyer, a major in the war plans division of Army stationed in Washington at the time of the attack. When on December 6th, our intercepts told us that the Japanese were going to strike somewhere the very next day, wherever in the Central Pacific or to the south in the Philippines and Dutch East Indies, the President of the United States could have gone on the radio and broadcast to the wide world that he had irrefutable evidence of an immediate Japanese intention to strike. This would have alerted everybody from Singapore to Pearl Harbor, even though inadequate in some cases to defend effectively. Nevertheless, our forces would have been able to take a toll which would have blunted the Japanese attack. In Hawaii, the capital ships might have been moved out of the congested harbor to sea, where Admiral Kimmel had at least had the foresight to keep the far more vital aircraft carriers. Furthermore, our carrier task force in mid-Pacific might have attacked the Japanese task force when its planes were aloft. There are many possibilities which would have given our men at least a fighting chance. Wedemeyer also writes that on December 4th, 1941, we received definite information from two independent sources that Japan would attack the United States and Britain would maintain peace with Russia. So FDR sacrificed much of the Pacific Fleet, and worse still, 2,403 Americans killed and 1,178 wounded to get the U.S. into war. Then after American victories at Midway and Coral Sea, the Japanese fleet was so crippled that offensive operations were no longer possible, and there was no longer any chance of the Japanese invasion of the U.S. mainland. Yet the administration still went through with its unlawful internment of West Coast Japanese Americans. That was Executive Order 1966. Other fake news, as told by the American government and parroted by the MSM, which is mainstream media, to drag or attempt to drag the U.S. into war include, but are not limited to, Fort Sumter, Remember the Maine, Gulf of Tonkin, Jessica Lynch, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, Pat Tillman, and chemical weapons attack by Syria. The real fake news sites, the mainstream media, will not tell you truths such as this. I've wondered if the greatest generation would have been so ready to sacrifice themselves for Roosevelt's bankster war if they had known the truth about Pearl Harbor and that Roosevelt and the communists in the State Department were bargaining away half of Europe to Joseph Stalin and communist totalitarianism while they were fighting and dying in the South Pacific, North Africa, and Europe. Great source here. Freedom Betrayed, Herbert Hoover's Secret History of the Second World War and its Aftermath. Edited with an introduction by George H. Nash. Interesting about Herbert Hoover. And people talk smack about him a few things. He was caught in the middle, but he sees this. I think what really happened. And of course, we got here a couple sources: Pearl Harbor Facts and Proof by Diogenes, Fake News and War Party Lies by Patrick J. Buchanan. FDR Goes to War: How Expanded Executive Power, Spiraling National Debt, and Restricted Liberties Shaped Wartime America by Burton W. Flossom Jr. and Anita Folsom. So, interesting there indeed, folks. This is why you got to always look at everything a bigger picture. And I remember I was hearing about this stuff a long time ago as well. You know what I'm saying? And of course, Japanese want to surrender. There's a lot of claims on that as well before the A-2 bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is why when people tell me about Theodore Delano Roosevelt, FDR, Theodore Delano Roosevelt, I have no respect for a man like that. People tell me he's a great president. Stop lying. I'm sick of all your pathetic garbage. This is why mainstream media is nothing more than garbage. I hate to say it, but it's true overall. I'll be very fair. This is one thing why September 11th, my friends. A lot of questions with that as well. All right, and you should always look at these little historical moments about these events and how come great men, even the women, suffered because of arrogance, the treasonous attributes from the FDR administration. So if you see a photo of him or a statue, I say use it as a porta potty. End of story. Anyone, or presidents, or anyone in Washington, D.C. supports these wars, they're owned by the banksters. They're New World Order garbage. And prove me wrong, folks, if you dare. I would love to hear from you as well. Alright, I could do one more here. I'm going to do a little brief. Came out yesterday, a couple days ago. Sorry about that. By Bob Livingston. The Media and George H.W. Bush. Somebody did a photo about this from Tulsa World with his tombstone. We're going to need a bigger headstone. Says here the coverage and eulogizing the former President George H.W. Bush by the mainstream media can be boiled down to these basic elements. One, we come not to bury him, but to praise him. And two, the only good Republican is a dead Republican. Both are hypocritical, both reveal the deep state. The standard trope is that Bush harkens us back to a time when politicians were civil or in which bipartisanship ruled the day, though it escapes me how it is a good thing when both the Republicans and Democrats agree on a way to steal more of your money and liberty. This is exactly the same treatment the mainstream media gave John McCain. Exactly. Remember how media loved McCain when he was bashing conservatism and hated him while he was pretending to be a conservative in his bid for president? By and large, the MSN hated, or at least pretended to hate, Bush during his time in office as both vice president and president, alternately calling him a racist, a wimp, reckless, out of touch, a shill for the rich, and other calumnies. After the 1992 election, Time magazine's William A. Henry said on PBS, the White House press corps, by and large, detests George Bush, arguing that the media's coverage was so biased that it hurt journalism among conservative and Republican voters, Henry said. The real contempt for him showed through in their reporting in a way that I think got up to the nose of the American people, which remind us of the wise man's adage, there is nothing new under the sun. Deconstructing the Bush legacy is not black and white. It's peeling black layers of the onion and finding that the deeper you go, the more to a putrid, rotten mess you find. He was born into the establishment family that made his fortune supporting Hitler's rise to power and the Nazi war machine well into 1942. Long after Hitler had invaded Poland and his design on all of Europe were well known and the country had declared war on America. Bush granddaddy and former U.S. Senator Prescott Bush was a patriarch of the patriarch of the Bush political dynasty and the founder and director of the UBC Bank, which was set up by Alvar Harriman, son of railroad money, and investment banker George Herbert Walker, to do business with the Thyessens, Germany's leading industrial family and admitted Nazis. The family connections to the Royal Institute on International Affairs and its American spin-off of the Council of Foreign Relations are documented, or CFR. George H.W. Bush became a leader in both the CFR and the Trilateral Commission, carrying water for the international bankers. And when Chase Manhattan Bank President David Rockefeller chaired both organizations. Bush once said, "Everything I am owed to David Rockefeller." End of Bush's run for president, Rockefeller said, "Go, Bush, go." All this set the stage for Bush to be in charge of an oil company, financed by the CIA, which was part of the Carlyle Group, a shakedown organization for stealing the wealth and resources of third world nations. Long live galvanization, right? At time, it appears that Bush was also in service to the British Crown, advocating world union or empire with the Anglo-American establishment on top. As a former UN ambassador, Bush always spoke on behalf of the global elite's dream of a new world order. As president, he went so far to proclaim the fulfillment of the New World Order in 1991 when he started the Persian Gulf War with Iraq. Absolutely. That Bush lost the Republican primary to Ronald Reagan in 1980 was one of the greatest political upsets of modern times. Reagan was persona non grata to the establishment, but his charm and wit and acting skills drew so many voters into his sphere that they overwhelmed both CFR men. First Bush and then incumbent Jimmy Carter. But the CFR quickly co-opted the Reagan presidency by forcing him to accept Bush as his VP, and Alexander Haig, George Shultz, Dan Reagan, William Casey, Malcolm Baldrige, Janine J. Kirkpatrick, Frank C. Carlucci, and William E. Brock, among others, into his cabinet. The attempted assassination of Reagan by John Hinckley Jr. served as a subtle reminder to Reagan as to who was running the show. Hinckley's parents were, coincidentally or not, a longtime friend of the Bush family. Folks, look this up. You'd be surprised. And I'll be very frank, too, is I recall that Ronald Reagan never wanted George Herbert Walker Bush as his president, as his running mate. So there's a lot of facts on that, even in the mainstream news. Okay, talking about this around 1979, 1980. And this is why when people tell me about Reagan this, Reagan that, I go, to be very frank, he was a patsy. And if people didn't like Reagan, did their homework and say, "You know what, man, you're right." And they thank me because you got to look at the bigger picture, folks. I will continue on here. There's no question that Bush and his family could and did often demonstrate compassion and kindness on a personal level. McClatchy's Andrew Malcolm listed his little-known kind gestures to many. Malcolm also writes of the former president. Bush had a quite coincidental presidency, calmly presiding over the peaceful end of the Cold War and German unification, and, among other things, assembling with quiet determination the international coalition that rescued Kuwait from Iraq's invasion. It's curious, or maybe it's not, that Malcolm doesn't tell us about the quiet determination Bush used to promote the Iraq invasion, based on a lie. The fabricated tale of Iraqi soldiers murdering Kuwait babies, made by Naira, the daughter of Kuwait royalty, before a phony congressional committee repeated for weeks by Bush as he sought to convince the American people to support his war for oil, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. As a result, we are now nigh over 28 years of war in the Middle East. Millions are dead, more are homeless, destitute, starving, and living under brutal tyranny. Middle Eastern Christians especially, thanks to the two Bushes and their desire to spread democracy. As Bush's kinder branded politics, as it became evident that Donald Trump was securing the Republican nomination, Bush announced he would be voting for Hillary Clinton, presenting ironclad evidence that there's no difference between the two political parties. Notes that Bush and Bush Jr. frequently cozied up and still cozy up to the Clintons and the Obamas while expressing nothing but disdain for Trump and his supporters. Neither Bush ever had anything negative to say about the Obama administration 8-year run of domestic policies that were ostensibly anathema to Bush republicanism. They are peas from the same pod. His support of Hillary also secured his legacy with the media, which was further cemented when he called Trump a blowhard who was driven by a certain ego in a book that came out last year. So much for Bush's civility. There was always something about Bush's appearance in public that seemed odd or out of place. It is as he failed to connect the rest of us with reality. It was not merely his aloofness, but his inability to draw simple, common-sense conclusions. Nor was it his constantly goofy, uncomfortable manner that distinguished him as different. Like that time, he abusively criticized those who revealed such CIA operations against the American people as MK-Ultra, calling it a ghastly period of disclosure, or when he groped a woman and dismissed his assault as actions of a dirty old man. No, it was mostly the clear pattern displayed time and again that Bush was never his own man, but one led by others. George H.W. Bush always acted like he had something to hide because he did something to hide. If it were going to harken back to any time, let's harken back to a time when presidents weren't imperial, all-powerful rulers, a time when shrines weren't built in their honor like for the pharaohs, a time they weren't worshipped like saints, with wall-to-wall media coverage and national days of mourning. Because, as constitutional scholar, historian, and author Kevin R. Gussman reminded us yesterday in a Facebook post, a president is not a king. He's certainly not a saint. Calling a former president president for life, giving his wife a title, and staff building a temple, presidential library in his honor. Calling on his acquaintances, retainers to lionize him in the media for days, allowing pilgrims to file past his coffin, etc., are not Republican traditions. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, the people who create this country, would have been disgusted by the celebration, worship of even the most unsuccessful of these people. Enough already. Enough indeed. I gotta thank Mr. Livingston for writing these articles, because it has plenty of merit. I know I'm not gonna. I know the times I don't really bash Bush a lot. I was highly critical of him. Like I said before, I hated what he stood for, but never wished the man any ill. Yes, he is a tyrant, a New World Order sap, was based on those attributes he displayed in his entire life. I will put him in the same category as David Rockefeller, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and John McCain. The founding fathers would be rolling in their graves, and I wouldn't blame them one bit. That's how you gotta look at it, friends. Presidents are just elected bastards by the state. They are represented by the states. The states, like the Senate's represented by the states, and the House supposed to be represented by the people. Those are constitutional facts. Not this hearsay, hierarchy, propaganda, these campaigning galore. This is why I tell everyone, never ever look for a Lord and Savior. It will burn you and make you feel disturbed. Like, I admit, the only person I really rallied for was Congressman Ron Paul when he ran for president twice, based on his principles, and that was it. He never had a magic lamp. None of these individuals did. Principles over party. No ends, ifs, or buts. Blue wave, red waves are nothing more than feces. Manure. Never believe the hype. You want to make things happen? Start from the ground up. Vigilance towards your elected servants. That's right, elected servants. Whereas on the local, state, or federal level, keep them on their toes. Notification is the answer. Anything they do that's unconstitutional, they become oath breakers. What I said before mentioned, regardless of what areas of government. So George Herbert Walker Bush, your New World Order will not prevail. They even talk about him maybe fake his death. But regardless, his global platform, along with all the other lackeys that are alive right now, it's not gonna succeed on a long view basis. That's all I have to say. That is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share us throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or if you send something that's interesting you want to check out, whatever you do, please send your correspondence with Decorum. Plus, I'll be posting my footnotes on my Facebook Spreaker page. All right? Once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is something for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.